What do we do?
We have everybody lined up here.
You see my bright Christmas pen?
Oh, that is neat.
Isn't that nice?
I don't even have mine Christmassy pen.
Oh, see.
Okay.
I know a guy you can get it from.
My one perk.
Yes.
I became chairman of the board at PMA. I said, what are the perks? They said, here's a box of pens. I'm like, great. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to call the order. Then David's going to call the order. You're going to do the pledge.
Gotcha.
Public comment, board member comments.
Gotcha.
David, you have from 6. You have from 6 through 7. I don't come back in again until 8. Oh, good. You have a bigger part of it. Well, shall we proceed? It is 7 o'clock. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this joint meeting of the Lower Paxton Township Board of Supervisors and the Lower Paxton Township Authority. I will call the meeting of the Board of Supervisors to order. Mr. Blaine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman of the Board of Supervisors. My name is David Blaine. I am the chairman of the Municipal Authority, and we will call the Municipal Authority meeting to order to handle municipal authority business, and then we will turn this back over to the township and Chairman Henry, and Chairman Henry will run the remaining portion of the meeting that deals with township matters. So first item of business will be the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mr. Zumas.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Zumas, thank you very much. All right, first item of business will be public comment. And public comment will be on anything that is not on the agenda this evening that is municipal authority related or township related. So it would have to be something that's not on the agenda. Is there anybody in the audience in this swelling audience that wants to speak on any matters related to township or the municipal authority? All right, hearing none, we will go to board member comments. Is there any board member comments at this point in time? Miss Lindsay.
Me on here. I just wanted to thank the Friendship Center, Rachel Scott and Barb and Terry Bachnight for the tree lighting on Friday night. There was probably approximately 500 people there. So just a thank you to them. It worked out great. And last Thursday, Mr. Zumas and myself attended the graduation from the Police Academy from HAC. We had 3 outstanding cadets in the Police Academy who are now with us on the road. And one of those cadets, Officer Minter, he was one of the outstanding academic. They had 2 that were tied. They get 950 points for a 25-week course, very intense course. He had 933. So congratulations to him for bringing home an award to Lower Paxton and for the 3 officers that graduated.
All right, Miss Lindsay, thank you very much. Any other board member comments? The only comment I'm going to make is that, Mr. Henry, thank you for giving me the opportunity here to run this joint meeting, and I can only hope that I can run the meeting as well as you run a meeting, according to my mother, who likes to watch these meetings on TV. So,
I really like your mother.
all right, so we're going to go to Lower Paxton Township and the authority business first. The first item of business will be an update on the Raftelis on Phase 2 stormwater fee analysis. And we will turn it over to Mr.
I'm just
Wolf.
going to do a very brief introduction, authority members and board members. As you're all aware, Lower Paxton Township well over a year ago, began a Phase 1 investigation into whether or not a sanitary sewer fee or tax should be instituted in Lower Paxton Township. From the Phase 1 analysis, we began a Phase 2 analysis, and helping us with those two efforts were experts from Raftellus Financial Consultants, Jen Fitz, who is now Jen Tavansis. Project's been going on long enough, she's changed her name. Is with us here tonight to talk further about this. But Jen tonight will be reviewing the final Phase 2 document, including a recommendation on a stormwater fee, a recommendation on a commercial credit program. She'll tell us her status in regard to a rate resolution, and we'll also talk about a Phase 3 work effort to implement a stormwater fee program. The Phase 2 work is essentially coming to an end here this evening with the presentation of these documents and ultimately the action on establishing a stormwater fee. So with that, Jen, do you want to stand up or sit down? And somebody's doing your slides for you. Brad will be doing your slides. So.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf, and thank you, board members and authority members, for having me here today. For most of this project, you've been hearing from my colleague, Keith Redling. I hope I can do the project justice in his absence. To sort of reiterate what Mr. Wolf said, I want to give you an update on the project and where we are now. I know you have heard our typical presentation many times now, so I won't go into too much detail on that side of things, but just give you kind of the lay of the land and looking forward what might be remaining before the stormwater fee can go into effect. So a little bit of history. As Mr. Wolf mentioned, we first conducted a stormwater funding feasibility study, mostly during 2017, and there were a number of tasks associated with that, but sort of the two big ones were to establish the revenue requirements of the stormwater program as a whole, so to figure out what the township is currently paying for various stormwater related services, and to think about how those costs and activities and obligations might escalate over future years. And we also assessed alternatives for funding those escalated costs and the likely impact on typical ratepayers or taxpayers. The sort of highlight there was that revenue requirements are expected to go up pretty drastically in the near term, and that's mostly in response to new municipal separate storm sewer system permit requirements and the associated sediment reduction that's required in water bodies that are receiving stormwater runoff from the township. We recommended from that report that the township pursue a stormwater fee to cover existing stormwater related costs and the anticipated approximate $1 million increase in costs in the near term and over the next several years. In comparing a tax or a fee, this is the part you know well, we believed a fee to be a more equitable way to recover those costs because the township's stormwater related obligations are mostly driven by stormwater runoff velocity, volume, and pollutants, which is directly related to the impervious area, the hard surface area on the ground that keeps stormwater from infiltrating into the ground and instead sort of channels it across the surface directly into receiving water bodies. So that seemed like the fairer way to allocate stormwater costs rather than on a tax value basis. And that was the basis of our first recommendation. sorry, can we go back? That's all right. So based on that recommendation, the board decided to move forward with fee implementation in April of this year. And since that time, we've been working on what is sort of commonly referred to as the Phase 2 effort. It involved data development, a lot of outreach, policy discussions with staff and members of these bodies, and financial planning, and ultimately a rate calculation, rate recommendation. So we'll go through some of those steps over the next couple of slides. And all of that is in support of stormwater billing beginning in July 2019. Now we can move on. All right. So first, just to talk a little bit about data development. To implement a stormwater fee based on impervious area, we of course have to know how much impervious area there is across the township. So one of our earlier tasks was to actually measure all of that. A technician on our team looked at every single property in the township that was not a single-family residential property and hand traced the impervious surfaces using mapping software, GIS. And this is what you're looking at on the screen now is the big picture, the whole township, and all of the yellow areas are the measured impervious surface areas. It's over 57 million square feet in total. And if we go to the next slide, you can see sort of zoomed in what this looks like on one particular property. I think this highlights kind of the level of detail and care taken in accurately capturing these impervious surfaces. This data is available to the township to use as it pleases, and it will certainly be invaluable for customer service and kind of customer confidence in the fee and the underlying calculations moving forward. We discussed numerous billing policies with staff and with members of this body. The first three on this list were the focus of an entirely separate meeting. Keith and I presented the potential staffing and cost and data maintenance impacts of implementing these types of policies. So first we looked at flat versus tiered residential rates. So flat means a single rate for every single family residential customer, whereas tiered rates could be a set of 3 or more different flat rates depending on the amount of impervious area on a single family lot. As I'm sure you recall, the sort of data maintenance needs and level of effort to maintain a tiered approach was higher than a flat rate approach, and we, having looked at a number of single-family residential properties, believed that the flat rate would be appropriate within the township. So that was our recommendation there. The credit program, we recommended against implementing a credit program at this time. And there's a separate credit policy consideration memo that I will come back to at the end. I think that's of particular interest to this body, but we can certainly come back to any of these other topics if you'd like as well. Together we discussed some alternative rate structures that build on an impervious area basis, but add a little bit more nuance and complexity. We talked about having a fixed fee component and having a gross area or total parcel area fee component. Ultimately, the consensus and our recommendation as well was to keep it simple, keep it as just an impervious area based rate structure, because that fits well with sort of the cost drivers for the township and is certainly the simplest and easiest to administer. And the last two fee exemptions and billing approach, we haven't had sort of big board or authority discussions about those, but generally the policy discussion and decision around fee exemptions has been to not have any. And that sort of aligns with the overall basis of the fee and defensibility of charging an impervious area fee, not to exclude any impervious area from that fee. And then as for billing approach, the obvious optimal approach here in the township is to fold stormwater fee billing in with sewer billing and kind of leverage the existing accounts and collections and customer service capabilities of that sewer billing group. Okay, we can move on to the next one. Just to kind of summarize the outreach, I think many of you have already heard about these meetings or maybe even sat in on some of them. We conducted 2 days worth of targeted outreach sessions. So on September 25th and 26th, there was a series of meetings with separate types of ratepayers or potential ratepayers that may have kind of specific questions or concerns related to the implementation of a new fee. So those were nonprofits, religious community entities, schools, multifamily, residential customers, and the developer community. And then about a month later, we had 2 meetings for the general public. That was, of course, a more general conversation, but we took lots of questions and kind of addressed public concerns at all of those meetings. There was a lot of feedback at those meetings, and I'm sure you recall some of it. I'll highlight that there was public interest in a credit program, although I think there was also kind of an understanding and acknowledgement of the township's needs. There was some concern about school district and nonprofits sharing in the fee and passing along the cost to other citizens. And there was a lot of discussion about particular drainage issues throughout the township. In the materials that were added to your site, there is, I think it's going to be reorganized after the meeting, but there's an appendix to a draft report that we've put together that includes lots of materials, but among them are both the kind of the presentation and handout materials for those public meetings, as well as a summary of what was heard and sort of the takeaways from those meetings as well. All right. Under phase 2 of this work, we also refined the financial plan that was built off the phase 1 established revenue requirements. And those revenue requirements were used for planning purposes over a kind of a 5-year planning window. We put together a financial planning and rate model, the final version of which will be delivered to the township shortly. But essentially what it does is plan out those revenue requirements, expected billing, anticipated revenue, and over a 5-year planning period, and ensure sort of the financial sustainability and revenue sufficiency for a new stormwater fee or stormwater utility. Based on the underlying revenue requirements, we recommended a rate that we thought could go without being changed in the very near term, barring any big deviations from those original revenue requirements. And we also recommended a rate structure based on the policy decisions that we've or the policy discussions that we've had and decisions that we've made. So the recommended rate structure and rates are for single-family residential properties that flat rate for each one. A single-family residential property is the basis for the billing unit for all other types of properties. That billing unit is called the equivalent residential unit, and it reflects basically the typical amount of impervious area on a single-family home. So all the single-family residential properties are charged for 1 ERU. All other properties are charged per ERU, and in this case, an ERU is equivalent to 3,400 square feet. And the rate per ERU that we recommended is $32 a quarter. All right, so a lot of work went into phase 2, and there are a number of deliverables that were recently shared with township staff, and I think even more recently shared with everyone in this group. They include the credit policy consideration memo, which again we'll come back to in a moment, a list of parcels and proposed stormwater fees that was shared for customer support and outreach related tasks. There is a summary of outreach meeting materials and sort of summaries of the meetings themselves included in the appendix, as I mentioned. And there's a final report that the appendices go with. That is just in draft form right now. It will be finalized once we've sort of received feedback from township staff and any feedback that this body might have. So we'll finalize that in the coming weeks. We also provided draft rate resolution language, which I believe is not on the table tonight, but will be in a couple of months when a few other details have sort of been sorted out. And then last but not least, the financial planning and rate model, which again will be provided shortly. And then I didn't put on this list, but the data underlying the stormwater fees, so the measured impervious area data, is of course also the township's to have a copy of whenever it wants. Now, I think we are right on schedule for what was planned under phase 2 and in preparation for July 2019 billing. But there are still some details to sort out and some additional support that the township may desire over the coming years. So we've presented a phase 3 draft scope to staff for consideration, and I don't think there's any action to take on that tonight either, but it's...
No, actually, I
sorry,
just wanted
go
to make a comment. Chairman's, I've never said that before. Actually, Jennifer did this at our request when we met with our stormwater group, which was staff and Raftellus. Looking forward, once we start the billing process, Raftellus is the appropriate firm to help us analyze this data when customers complain about their bill, which we know is going to happen someday. They have all the data. They're going to turn it over to us, but we're going to need help at staff level for at least a year to be able to help with that. And she and Leanne and Randy, as part of their outreach meetings and part of the communication and customer support issues, came up with some other things as well. Now, long term, we'd like to get HRG on board because later tonight you're going to presumably appoint them as the stormwater engineer. So down the road, it makes more sense for them to do that. But with the size of this data and all the work that Jennifer and Keith did to that project, it makes a lot more sense at staff level to recommend to the board that we continue a relationship with them, so we have to look at this phase 3, and then we'll be reporting back to the board in January.
Okay, thanks. I don't think I have anything else to say about phase 3. So that brings me to the end of the prepared comments. I promised that we could go back to the credit policy consideration memo. And Mr. Gottschall, I can help you navigate there. It's under, oh, you got it. Okay, perfect. So this memo was prepared by Ralph Dellis and reviewed by staff, and it basically summarizes our position and our recommendation for not implementing a credit program at this time. I guess I'll just walk through the key points. A credit program is sometimes employed by stormwater utilities to incentivize decentralized stormwater management. So rather than the township having to do all of the stormwater management, there could be a way to sort of decentralize that effort. And a credit program is the way that some utilities, some municipalities attempt to do that. The idea is that doing so either reduces demand on the public drainage system or otherwise results in cost savings to the utility by helping meet permit requirements or other public service obligations. There are a couple of examples of stormwater control measures that are eligible for credit under some utility credit programs in this memo, if you're interested. They always are required to be well-designed and well-functioning to be eligible for credit, because otherwise they're not having the intended impact on the stormwater system. We discussed with the board and authority and staff the kind of potential for a credit program here, but believed that the near-term costs to the stormwater program were unlikely to be reduced through this type of decentralized stormwater management, and that the administrative cost of a sort of a full-service township program paired with the revenue reduction of a credit program would total about $250,000 a year, which was which felt too high to make it worth it at this point in time. So we recommended against it, with the knowledge that it can always be revisited as the program matures. And I'll just point out that even without kind of a formal credit program, it would still make sense for proven, well-functioning pervious pavement or green roofs, which are two types of control measures that sort of reduce the impervious area footprint of a property, that those two types of control measures could reduce the impervious area on a property and therefore reduce the bill for that non-residential type of property. So that could be managed sort of without a formal credit program.
Hey, Jen, over here. Hi, over here, Jen.
Sorry. Yes, sir.
So I think, if I understand, at least for now, any reduction in runoff we would get through individual efforts will not lower the overall cost
In the near
of the
term. that's
stormwater
correct.
expenses.
That's right.
Okay, because that's, of course, the issue people bring up. I'm causing less runoff. Why don't I get a break? And the answer is that the overall cost of the entire project aren't changing, so there's still an expense we have to meet. So
That's exactly
is there a point in which until enough people are doing it, or is there a point at which it does actually have an impact on the overall cost of stormwater management?
That point could come at the earliest when your MS4 permit is renewed and your obligations under that permit are lower than they otherwise could be. That's not for another 4 or more years
So
here.
it's not a matter of, when I said we get to a point, I meant if there are X amount of households actively reducing their runoff,
I see.
but both of those scenarios, I understand, are true.
Right.
Have you seen it anywhere? Have communities that are ahead of us, as far as having done this years before us, have they ever achieved a point in which, so many residents are doing it now, these best practices, that it begins to actually lower the overall cost, or we're so far away from that,
Well, I wouldn't say that it's related to a certain number or certain proportion of properties kind of taking up the cause. It would be, I think, advisable if an analysis of the program's costs kind of reflected a reduction that could be tied back to those types of activities. Sounds like you want to add, yep.
Maybe address the question a little bit differently. I have not seen any municipality publish any place that they have reduced their overall flow from stormwater due to best management practices.
And how about with big developments, big housing developments that have somewhat more intricate stormwater systems in there? Do they do enough to warrant?
I have not seen attempts to reduce flow in that regard. There aren't a whole lot that have actually implemented a stormwater fee at this point in time that would have had the fee mature to the point where you would have decrease in flow. I'm not aware of any empirical data.
Enough to impact the overall cost of the stormwater management.
Correct. And remember, our costs are not due to volume. Our costs are due to aging infrastructure and sediment. So volume in and of itself is not the issue. Many facilities have volume control, and our engineers can tell you that detention basins are designed, and for a long time were volume control measures. They need to become sediment control measures as well. But our costs are not volume related. They're infrastructure, age of infrastructure, and sediment related.
Well, last question. Does not volume impact sediment? Doesn't that drive sediment?
Theoretically, yes. But our facilities, and an engineer can tell you this, our facilities in Lower Paxton Township were designed not for sediment reduction, our stormwater management facilities. They were designed just for volume control. There's very few that have been built that have included best management practices that would today qualify for sediment reduction.
Okay. And that's going to be a large part of our investment going forward.
Correct.
Okay.
Jennifer, I got a question for you. So the $32 a quarter rate that is being considered, knowing what we know for the next 3 to 5 years in the plan in regards to development, do you see that $32 rate can stay the same? Do you foresee inflationary increase to that rate? I mean, what do you see with that rate?
That rate was calculated to be able to stay the same over the 5-year period. It will be, of course, up to this body to decide to keep it that way over the
Okay.
over the period. But that was the planned intent. Yes.
Yeah, just one comment there, because I know,
Yes.
Mr. Blaine, you're used to, as chairman of the authority, GHD provides that 20, 30-year consent order costs, sewer rate analysis. Their phase 2 study was just the 5-year.
And that's
Revenue,
okay.
yeah.
I'm not looking for
Right.
like what the
Okay.
next 20 years is going to look like. I'm
Yeah.
just looking for
Yeah.
what the next what we're projecting really probably in the next 3 years in regards to that rate. So we're saying $32 should be consistent across the next 3 years.
Yep.
Jennifer,
Okay.
I just had a question on the credit program. With the other municipalities that you've dealt with, have any of them started out with a credit program, or did they down the road go to the credit program?
Some municipalities do start out with a credit program. It's much more often the case that it's a non-residential property credit program only.
Okay.
But others opt to wait and kind of take it on as a next step after getting the
Because I know
utility
down in
established.
Lancaster City, I guess it is, they have a credit program down there, but I don't know if they started with it. So, okay, thank you.
Not sure about that one.
Okay. Is there any further questions at this point? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So the next item of business that we'll go to then is a review of the final 2019 Stormwater Fund budget. Mr. Wolf again.
Authority members, supervisors, you have seen the budget for stormwater at least 2 times in the past. I can tell you that the budget before you this evening is for operating expenses and revenues remains unchanged from the document that you last saw. It expects revenues of $2,612,720 against total expenses for operation of $2,490,014. That budget is also followed by a capital budget, which has changed since the last time you saw the budget. The capital budget for 2019 is $2,489,000. It's $200,000 more than what you previously have seen. An explanation of that is provided in a memorandum that I've provided to both the supervisors and the authority. And this memorandum is an attempt to quantify capital improvement costs over the next 3 years. Knowing that the authority is starting with a zero fund balance, and knowing that the authority is most likely going to, for its stormwater fund, have to borrow funds in some form in 2019. Again, this program is designed to improve and replace aging infrastructure and also reduce settlement through stream bank restoration projects. For 2019, we expect capital expenditures to include $1.7 million in projects which are now identified in a summary which has been provided to us by HRG. Those projects are different than what you have seen before because we had previously expected the BC 2A project to begin in 2019. That project for sanitary sewer purposes will begin in 19, the BC 2A project, but for stormwater purposes, expenditures won't occur until 2020 and 21. So to fill the void and to continue to work towards our end result of reducing sediment and at the same time replacing aging infrastructure, capital projects that have been previously identified have been cost estimated by our engineers, and a $1.7 million cost has been attached to those projects. That's $200,000 more than what was previously included in your capital improvement fund budget. In addition, for 2019, you will have $590,000 budgeted for a stream bank restoration project, which is proposed in the Stonebridge apartment complex, as well as administrative expenditures for the Paxton Creek TMDL. At $159,000. Total capital expenditures in 2019 are now budgeted again at $2,449,000. Looking forward from that point, board members, 2020 and 21, we will have the BC2A project, and that is currently estimated at $3.4 million. HRG has done an estimate of that, and if you go to the page 13 of the summary that has been provided by HRG, you'll see that the BC2A project begins. I apologize, we should have split those two PDFs out that one PDF out into two documents, but we have them all there. It's just all in one document as opposed to two. So $3.4 million in 2020 and 21 for the BC2A project. And then, of course, the board still has, the authority still has, a need to continue on with stream bank restoration projects. Our Paxton Creek TMDL previously listed Earl Drive project, phases 1, 2, and 3, at an estimated cost of approximately $1.4 million. We have that as a budget number at this point in time. There's things that will affect that budget number. Number one, we have a intermunicipal pollution reduction plan for Paxton Creek, but we don't have an intermunicipal implementation plan at this point in time. And neither Susquehanna, CRW, or Lower Paxton Township has moved forward on an intermunicipal implementation plan because we have not received approval of our pollution reduction plans. So we're not sure we can implement what we have submitted. So we got to wait for DEP to respond to us. So at this point in time, we can't effectively budget on an intermunicipal basis. We should in the future as we begin to implement the pollution reduction plan. The second part of the issue is that we have previously investigated at least the phase 1 portion of the Earl Drive project, and we have met with significant resident opposition on that project. So whether that project is still viable or not, I don't know. If it is not viable, I do believe you will have a similar expenditure in another project that we have yet to identify, because we do have to meet pollution reduction requirements in Paxton Creek. So using the $1.4 million budget number to compute total expenditures over 3 years, again, in 2019, you have capital expenditures now budgeted at $2.49 million. For the BC2A project in 2021, you have $3.4 million budgeted. And then again, PRP projects 2020 to 23 over and above the Stonebridge project, you have $1.4 million. Total expenditures between now and 2023 are estimated at a little bit less than $7.3 million. So I wanted you to have this capital expenditure summary at this point for what it is. It is not detailed to the point where we can say this is exactly what's going to happen, because there are still pieces of the puzzle that have yet to be put into play. However, it's what we best know today to look at our long-term needs. We do know that we will have $1.7 million plus in infrastructure and expenditures next year, and hopefully the Stonebridge project will again move to construction at about $600,000. And we do know that the BC2A project will move forward in 2020 and 21. Those are definites. Board members, that's my summary of your budget as well as capital expenditures for stormwater, not only in 2019, but for the foreseeable future. And I think that if you look further into 2019 at potential borrowing, that memorandum can be the beginning of a basis to determine the amount of funds that you will look to borrow in some form next year. I'll be happy to address any questions.
Mr. Wolf, just 2 questions for you. Number one, in regards to the first thing, thanks for the detail on the budget. That was very good in regards to the projects that will be completed in the next number of years. I just want to reemphasize again, we've talked about this before, the management reimbursement for that will be paid to the township and the management reimbursement to the municipal authority or sewer authority.
Correct.
I know that that's a calculation based upon time that will be spent by municipality employees to the municipal authority, but we should, because of the information that we're using or because of the percentages that we're using that are dated, I would highly recommend that we make sure that we do a more detailed study of that time, because when 40% of your expenses for administration are coming from a reimbursement, I mean, if that number's wrong by just a couple $100,000, that does impact the rate. That would theoretically impact your rate.
Correct.
Yeah. So just want to make sure that we have good detail and we do a time study on that in regards to how much time spent as we get the stormwater fund up and running. So.
Well, and as we've discussed in the past, we have never, the 20% reimbursement on sanitary sewer fund was established in 1997, and it has not been reevaluated since that point in time, and it was not based upon a detailed time study. So we should probably analyze total cost of the intermunicipal, the management agreement between the township and the authority on a time basis.
Second question is on the revenue anticipation note. What's the interest rate that we're getting on that note?
Well, it depends on how we do it. Our previous borrowings have been in the neighborhood of 4.5%. I don't know. We have not investigated yet. There is also the potential just to delay billing between the stormwater fund and the township, and the stormwater fund and the sanitary sewer fund, with the sanitary sewer fund being primary or the township being primary and covering the costs until actually we receive revenues from the first bill. Staff is looking into that and would prefer to do that so that we don't actually incur interest costs.
Okay. Fair enough.
But we have included that as a number just in case.
Okay. Is there any other questions after review of the 2019 Stormwater Fund budget from any of the members of the board? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to review of the memorandum for the Stormwater Capital Improvements Plan, which I think you've already
I
covered,
just did that.
George, so that's already done. So we will move on then to the action to be taken by the municipal authority. So first item of business will be action on the 2019 Stormwater Fund budget. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the budget as presented this evening.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the 2019 Stormwater Fund budget as presented by Mr. Wolf.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Eby. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Judd. Any further discussion? Okay, Ms. Smith, can we do this by roll call vote, please? Sorry, caught you off guard.
Mrs. Lindsay,
Aye.
Mr. Chrisman, I apologize, he's not here. Mr. Eby,
Aye.
Mr. Judd,
Aye.
Mr. Zumis,
Aye.
Mr. Blaine.
Aye. Stormwater budget for 2019 passes as presented. Thank you very much. Next item of business will be action on the HRG retainer agreement for appointment as a stormwater engineer. With us tonight are Mr. Kenworthy and the G of HRG, Mr. Grubik. How about that? Mr. Kenworthy.
Thank you. As stated at the last meeting, We did present some items of our agreement. Certainly, I don't have anything additional to present at this time. If there's any additional questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Okay. I think everybody's had a chance to see the agreement before from HRG. Is there any further questions, anything that anybody wants to discuss in regards to the retainer fee, the rates per hour, anything of that nature from the board? Okay. Hearing no comments, we'll just go to a voice vote. Or let's entertain a motion to approve the actions for HRG's retainer agreement.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve action on the HRG retainer agreement.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Eby. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Ms. Lindsay. Any further comment? Okay. I think we do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? So carried. All right.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Final item of business for the authority will be action on the Stray Women's Farm deed or sewer deed of dedication for sanitary sewer extensions.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The sanitary sewer dedication is for the Triple Crown sewer extensions. You have two documents before you this evening. I'll explain the difference between the two. The sanitary sewer dedications for Phase 1, 2B, 3B, 9A, and 9B. That's the center line of the streets. Those sewers are in the township street. The other deed of dedication document simultaneously dedicates the actual sewer easement for sewers off the street and the sewer itself, and those phases are listed. These are generally just deeded dedications that you'll see from time to time to dedicate the sewer extensions. These are documents that Solicitor Stein has prepared for many years for the authority, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions by board members for Mr. Weaver? Mr. DeSanto, do you have any comments that you would like to make at all? Anything of that nature? Okay. I do see there's one member of the public that would like to talk on the matter. Mr. Trish, how are you?
John Trish, 600 Prince Street. Are these the same sewers that were the subject of the $50,000 14-year guarantee?
Yes, they are.
Why is that not noted in the memorandum?
The question is the $50,000 issue in terms of the deed of dedication. It's not related to this. That was part of a sewer maintenance agreement that was prepared by Solicitor Stein and Mr. DeSanto, and that covers future maintenance of the sewer. This is a legal document to physically hand over the sewer. The maintenance of those sewers in the future and the letter of credits being provided by Mr. DeSanto is a separate document that was already acted on by the authority.
Okay. Thank you.
Further comment. About 3 or 4 meetings ago, we had a 82-year-old woman here complaining about a drain that was on her property that the township had no recollection of. Now, we're going to accept these streets and these drains, and if something happens in 14 years, and if some people aren't here tonight or watching tonight or know about this, they're not going to know that there's an obligation for Triple Crown to repair them. Now, my solution is, one, when the $50,000 agreement was issued, every resident that lives in that development should have received a notice saying, hey, we are entering an agreement with Triple Crown to accept this. Or two, tonight, if we accept the roads, they ought to receive a notice saying that the township accepted. Is there a problem with that?
You're suggesting that the residents will be liable for this?
What I'm
think what
suggesting
he's
is-
suggesting is that
Notified.
that the
15 years
residents would
from
be
now,
notified
after,
of.
I'm sorry, Mr. Blaine.
No, I'm sorry. I think what you're trying to say is that the residents should be notified of the dedication of the sewer lines, but the sewer agreement that's been put in place to try to maintenance them in the event there's something that happens in the next 15 years.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I can address the question. So sanitary sewer extensions are dedicated to the authority under our Act 537 plan. We are charged with maintaining the public sewer system. The developer, as part of his recorded plan, offers the sewers for dedication. Developers do not want to have sewers that are private. So in Lower Paxton, at least in my tenure here, all the sewers have been public. So the homeowners are not, they're not part of this process. This is part of the developer who owns the streets and the property that's being dedicated. It has nothing to do with the private property owners.
So, in other words, what we're saying is that this is really no different than any other sewer dedication where the township, the municipality is
Correct.
responsible for the maintenance of the sewer system no matter what.
Correct.
Therefore, if there is a problem with the sewer system in the street, that would be the township's responsibility no matter what. No matter if there's a private sewer agreement with the developer for potential maintenance, for them to fund the maintenance that the township would have to take on in the event that there is some type of error inside the system. The bottom line is we're still responsible ultimately at the end of the day for maintenance of the system, no different than any other sewer and anywhere else in the township.
That's correct. And then the only difference would have been the maintenance agreement, which with this body already previously approved, and that was for what Mr. Trish is referring to. There's those utility conflicts, which that was a separate agreement, and there was logic behind the 50,000 and the renewable 50,000 if there is an issue, which we don't suspect there would be. We don't hope for that. Of course.
I think Mr. Trish's issue, though, is that what if something happens 14 years from now, okay? And we acted on this maintenance agreement 14 years ago.
Right.
How are we making sure internally that we can act upon that maintenance agreement for those funds to repair the sewer if it's within that 15-year maintenance time? If we've theoretically had issues in the past with tracking that, I think is what Mr. Trish is trying to say.
Yes, we have a letter of credit that's provided as part of the maintenance agreement, and that is in our possession. So that letter of credit allows us, if there is a problem with the sewer, the only way we're going to find out if there's a problem with the sewer, if we're made aware of it by the public or a private property owner. That's how we maintain our current system. Newer systems, there's not any maintenance that's really required. They operate and function fine. The older sewer system, you have roots, you have offset joints, grease. So our staff is in constant motion out there, TVing and flushing lines that are 50, 60 years old. These are brand new sewers, so we don't expect any problem. But in 14 years, I already warned Mr. DeSanto that you better believe we're going to go out there and TV those sewers to make sure they're still okay before we free up the rest of the $50,000.
So the maintenance agreement that's in place is traditional maintenance agreement that we have on occasion with developers for projects that we keep track of.
Right.
And
They're typically a year and a half, but in this case, there was an exception because of the utilities. But
okay.
Yep.
But I think what is your concern about notification?
My concern is when Mr. Weaver first started speaking, he said in street and off street. What's the difference? And the ones that are off street, have they been notified?
What is the concern? What is the risk?
Mr. Judge, the concern is that we're going to have somebody other than who's here tonight or who knows about it complaining and have a problem with their sewer.
I understand, Mr. Trish, I understand what you're talking about. Mr. Trish is concerned about a situation where a private facility fails and nobody knows that they have that private facility on their property. This, oh, there you are. This is not, that's okay. This is not a private facility. If it's either in road or out of road, it will all be within a public right-of-way, and it will be owned and maintained by the township, whether it's in the street or outside of the street. It will all be within a public right-of-way. As opposed to the situation you referred to earlier, that was all in a private right-of-way that the township was not party to, so we were not, and the property owner was not aware of. Different situation.
George, Mr. Wolf,
That's okay.
I appreciate that. But we're making decisions for a big corporation to continue doing business when they're supposed to be using best management practices. There was a problem. Mr. Weaver explained that at the one meeting, he said there was sagging in the lines, but it was appropriate. Mm-hmm. And all I'm saying is, it's a brand new system, and there's already sagging in the lines. And I have some acquaintances that live in that development, and their concerns were what happens. And I said, well, you better make sure that you get a copy of what's going on. So all I'm doing is I'm looking out for the interest of township residents, that if there's a problem, that they know about it. And I don't understand why it's so difficult that if a multi-million-dollar company can't send out a notice saying, hey, we had a problem, we corrected it, we have a bond, if you have a problem, contact us. That's all I'm saying.
Not on their property.
The bond doesn't go to the property owners, it goes to the township. Let me put this another way to you. Here is a situation where a developer has installed a line, there is a issue with the line, and the developer has financially backed up the issue with surety to the township for a significant period of time. He has protected the township's facility, and from that, the township is legally required to make sure the service is provided to the property owner. Property owner won't be affected one way or the other.
But Mr. Wolf, if the lines fail in their front yard going into the house, the property owner is responsible.
Property owners own their lateral, yes. Building sewer, own their building sewer, yes.
Which these documents don't have anything to do with those private sewers.
Yeah,
they
and
only
I
have
think
the-
that might have been what he was getting at, and I just wanted to clear that up, that if it's on the property, on the property owner, that they're responsible for that. We are
Property
not.
owner is responsible for the building sewer. This has nothing to do with building sewers. This is purely the public main, whether it's in the street or in public right-of-way. All of which will be maintained by the township.
Okay. Mr. Wolf, thank you very much. Any further comment or discussion for Mr. Weaver, Mr. Wolf, anything of that nature? Okay, hearing none.
You gonna say something? I thought you were coming up to say something else.
Well, the comment about the SAG, that they were within the tolerances of the engineer, so we called it a SAG, but it met our criteria, so that.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, is there any further comments? Hearing none, is there an action to approve the motion in front of us, or the Stray Winds Farm sewer deed dedication?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the Stray Winds Farm sewer deed of dedications.
Thank you, Mr. Eby. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Zumas. Any further discussion? Let's do this by a roll call vote, if you could, please.
Mrs. Lindsay,
Aye.
Mr. Eby,
Aye.
Mr. Judd,
Aye.
Mr. Zumas,
Aye.
Mr. Blaine.
Aye. Motion carries. I will now turn the gavel over. We will, I guess we should adjourn the municipal authority meeting. So, motion to adjourn the municipal authority meeting.
Move to adjourn.
So moved. We're adjourned. I will now turn it over to the esteemed Chairman Henry.
I don't know about esteemed, but you've set the bar very high, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Before we proceed with our Board of Supervisors agenda, I would like to announce that prior to the meeting this evening, the Board of Supervisors met in executive session, and during that period of time, we received information on personnel and legal matters. And so with that, we will proceed to the Board of Supervisors workshop agenda, and the first item is action on bids for the emergency repairs to the wastewater collection system. Mr. Weaver.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. You have in your packet the summary of the bid opening for the emergency repairs to the wastewater collection system. The bid specs were prepared by GHD. You have GHD's recommendation letter along with the bid tabulation. I've also provided the summary of work that's typical for this project. There's a description in there. Essentially, this is for work that our staff certainly can't do for force mains out on the PennDOT right away, from our pump stations, for any kind of deep sewers that are in the main street that fail and require immediate assistance from this contractor because someone is having either sewage in their basement or violating the Act 537 program for having sewage overflows. Essentially, this is a unique type of work, and the board has always asked when we get one bid, why is this occurring? So I did just put in my memo, we do contact the contractors. The issue for them is the response is not within the parameters that they can achieve with their company. We do require this to be in an emergency basis. And also, there is really no guarantee of work. So we can't predict when we're going to have an emergency sewer situation. So contractors typically do not see this as favorable for their company business plan. So fortunately, we are fortunate that Rogel bids it. Otherwise, we would be looking at coming to the board and gearing up with a garage expansion and more equipment and more people to be able to do this kind of work. Fortunately, that doesn't have to occur. You can see that our expenses are no more than $75,000 a year. This is just an engineer's estimate based on experience of what we've seen. We knock on wood, hope that that continues. And that really is a summary of the emergency repairs contract, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So this isn't for currently existing projects, it's for future projects that may arise.
Any emergency.
Any emergency project that would
Yep.
arise. There's not like currently a list of.
No, this is just unknown sewer emergencies that we're not aware of.
Like a sewer main break,
Correct.
where we want people, we don't want to start the bidding process.
Basically, the
That's all.
sewer is not working. It broke and it needs
Yeah.
fixed immediately.
And we've
And
used
it does
them
happen.
before.
Our system is being replaced as part of our project. We're doing about 50% of our system as part of our consent order, which we speak about frequently. But there is another half of the system that is 50 to 60 years old, and you never know when it's going to fail.
We have used them before, Bill, right?
Yes, we have. Yep, they have the current contract, which expires December 14th. So we are recommending the board approve the bid to Rogel in the amount of $78,552.32.
Okay, I see we're planning to take action on these bids. Is there a motion?
Yes, I'll make the motion, Mr. Chairman, that we award the bid to Rogel Incorporated for emergency repairs to wastewater collection system to the amount of $78,552.32.
Has been moved by Mrs. Lindsay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Judd. Any board member questions or comments? Any public questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Now we want to have a review of, by HRG, of the Stonebridge Apartment Stream Restoration Preliminary Design Proposal. And this is a proposal for professional engineering services. Good evening, Mr. Hines.
Good evening. Before you tonight, you have a proposal from HRG to undertake preliminary design efforts on the stream restoration project at the Stonebridge apartment complex that was referenced earlier in the evening. This project was identified in the Paxton Creek TMDL plan as one of the top 5 most egregious sediment polluters to Asylum Run and Paxton Creek. The preliminary design would take us to a position where we would have adequate drawings to present to DEP and to the property owner to solicit their feedback, at which time we would present the results of those 2 sessions back to you and request authorization to move forward into final design and project permitting. So with that, happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Jason, I know we were going to do this earlier in the year, but there was going to be a change in ownership of the apartments. Has that already happened?
Yes, it has. That
Okay,
happened.
because I know the old apartment complex, the owners did not want to engage in it. So the new apartment complex, they're okay with it?
Yes, and actually the previous owners also supported the project.
Right,
at
it was
the
just
time
because of the change of hands?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
But the new owners are all right?
Yes.
Okay.
And Jason, just because this is part of a stormwater management and it's what we're talking about and it's what is going to be a growing expense for the township, can you real quickly just identify what is the problem? What are the future, I know we're just in the early stages here, but what are the expected remediation efforts? And then what do we expect the outcome to be?
Sure. And anybody who drives Colonial Road in the vicinity of the Colonial Park Mall knows where the Stonebridge apartment complex is. You can easily see that the stream is severely eroded. The goal of the project would be to remove what we refer to as the legacy sediment that's built up in that stream channel over a long period of years and establish a more natural floodplain cross-section with a defined channel, defined overbanks, and some tolerant plantings that are typical to a natural floodplain environment. What the models have shown is that this this project would potentially reduce the amount of sediment that's reaching Paxton Creek by about 207,000 pounds per year. So in terms of meeting the township's obligations under Paxton Creek TMDL plan and the Chesapeake Bay pollution reduction plan, those are some lofty numbers that will help achieve those goals.
What is, you said some 200?
207,000 pounds.
So just for folks that are just starting to appreciate the science here, what is that? Do we have an idea? What is that? I think we ultimately have to need a 35% reduction in sediment or runoff. But how much sediment is going into the creek? Do you know offhand? It's really not something you would know offhand.
Yeah, so for the Paxton Creek TMDL, the existing sediment load that was calculated at the time of the TMDL plan was about 3.5 million pounds per year of sediment that's reaching Paxton Creek. Our reduction requirement through DEP was 347,000, almost 900 pounds per year. So you could see this project would significantly help in achieving those required reductions.
Jason, is there any way of calculating pounds per versus percentages?
I'm kind of confused. What are you referring to?
Like Mr. Judd
Percentages?
indicated, we're required to reduce 35%.
Well, we got to reduce it by 347, did you say?
Yes, so
347?
that's about 10%.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Jason? Okay. Any public questions for Jason? Seeing none, I guess this is just a review. We're not planning action on this for this evening?
Yes, correct.
Yes, that would be correct. Oh, okay, good. Then thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That will take us to item C, and we are going to take action on item C. Final adjusting change order for the final adjusting change order for change order number 3 for the BC 4C and 4E mini basin project. Mr. Dahl, that's a mouthful.
Yeah. Chairman and members of the board, I have change order number 3 for the mini basin PC 4C 4E project for your consideration here tonight. And just to give you a location reference, since PC 4C 4E probably doesn't mean a whole lot to most people,
Right.
we're talking about sort of the Paxtonia area, generally between, I would say, a small portion north of Route 22, but the bulk of the work south of Route 22, generally between Atmore Street and South Mountain Road. So that gives you a little better idea of what project we were talking about. This is a final, change order 3 is a final adjusting change order. So basically what this does is this reconciles the original estimated bid quantities to the actual installed quantities that were measured in the field. Briefly, I did want to go over 2 positive takeaways on this project that I think the board should be aware of. First, the final contract value for this project came in $592,284.53 under the original contract value. So we're happy, obviously, about the cost savings there, but at the same time, the second thing I have is it was a successful project. We were able to show with our metering results that the 2 mini basins demonstrated favorable results. We had a removal of 96% of the excess I&I in PC4C and 100% in PC4E. So with that, I can answer any questions you may have on this final adjusting change order.
So the change order is a decrease of a total of $626,456?
No, the total, well, yeah, but there were other change orders acted on previously that raised the
That raised
contract
the
value.
rate, yeah. So what is the total savings then when you,
The total savings was $592,284.53 between the original contract value and what your approved would be acting on here tonight.
So it's 34,000, the decrease for tonight?
No, it's almost 600,000.
Oh, that one. Oh, okay. All right.
which sounds to me like something we ought to approve.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, yes. Okay, can we have a motion on final adjusting to this change order number 3?
I'll make a motion that we approve the final adjusting change order 3 for the PC 4C 4E mini basin project for the amount of $597,284.53.
Is there,
Is that right, Tim?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
is there a second?
A second.
Second by Mr. Zimmons. Any additional board member questions or comments? Any public questions or comments? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
You may bring those before us anytime you like.
Mr. Chairman, just, I want to make one other comment when Tim leaves, just to give Tim some credit and GHD. So, it's pretty far back, but just wanted to make the board aware that the engineer's estimate for this project was $9.5 million, and Dolly bids projects very aggressively to get the work. So they bid it $1 million under the engineer's estimate. So the savings was 600,000, but I wanted to point out there was an additional $1 million savings to the next low bidder and the engineer's estimate. So typically what happens, as you know, we don't like to talk about these things, but contractors try to make it up in change orders. They didn't do that. So I just want to give, feather in the cap for Tim and GHD.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for doing
Thank
it.
you.
And the work got done properly.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's
thank you
just
very
as
much.
important.
In the
In the end, it
In the
got
end, it
done.
did.
In the
In
end,
the
it
end,
did.
it's working the way it should.
And we've used them before and had very good luck with them over the years.
Right,
Don't
yes.
we? Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, as a ratepayer, that's very much appreciated.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Well.
Thank you. Okay, we have improvement guarantees, a letter of credit and an escrow, both which appear to be rather routine. Are there any questions? May we have a motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve the improvement guarantees for Autumn Oaks Phase 2 and 724 Hampton Court, reduction and a new.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And with that, what I thought was going to be a very, very long meeting has moved along very expeditiously, and we will gather here next Tuesday at 7 o'clock for our next meeting of the Board of Supervisors. Any additional comments or announcements from the board or the township manager? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor, aye. Thank you all.